There are places in America where land is getting so expensive. It feels like the soil itself signed up for a finance degree. Places where 1 acre costs more than a car, a wedding, and 3 midlife crises combined. Where the dream of buying your own little piece of earth fades faster than your phone battery at 3% in the desert. And yet, there are still corners of the map, tiny, stubborn, almost mythical, where land is somehow under $1,000 an acre. Not sort of affordable. Not, well, technically, if you squint. But genuinely, shockingly, wait, that can't be right, cheap. These are the last states where the American land rush hasn't been swallowed by investors, developers, and people from big cities who buy property the way others buy seasonal candles. These states are disappearing fast. Listings vanish in hours. Prices creep upward every month. And the world of cheap land, the real cheap land, is shrinking like a puddle in a Texas summer. Before we dive into them, hit subscribe. Not for me, for the algorithm. Every time you click that button, somewhere out there a Zillow listing stays under $1,000 an acre for 5 minutes longer than it should. Or at least that's what I tell myself to sleep at night. All right, let's talk about why finding land for under $1,000 per acre feels like discovering a unicorn grazing behind a gas station. Because on paper, it sounds impossible. Migration squeezed prices in places nobody cared about 10 years ago. Inflation turned cheap into cute. Corporations started buying land the way crows collect shiny objects, and rural America keeps losing population, which, ironically, makes the land cheaper, but the opportunity cost higher. So where does the real cheap land still live? Not the scams, not the swamps you can't legally stand on, not the 1 acre corner of a cliff specials. I'm talking about real land, acreage you can walk, camp, fence, build on, dream on, if you're brave enough. But before we head into the last surviving states, we need one tiny prologue. Because not all cheap land is the same. There's private rural land, the kind families have sold for generations. There are land auctions, sometimes gems, sometimes chaos. There are subdivisions with no utilities, created in the optimism of the 70s. And there's the ultimate category, remote ranch land, where the nearest neighbor is a tumbleweed with commitment issues. Now that we're calibrated, let's start the tour. The last 7 states where land is still under $1,000 an acre, while it lasts. There are parts of New Mexico where the land looks ancient. Not old, not historic, but ancient. Like the earth is still remembering a time before fences, roads, or the idea that dirt should cost money. High desert stretching so far, it feels like the horizon is trying to escape you. Mesas rising like giant stone tables left behind by careless gods. Sagebrush whispering in a wind that never learned to slow down. Sunlight so bright it doesn't shine. It cuts. This is where cheap land goes when it needs privacy. Welcome to the New Mexico nobody advertises. Not Santa Fe with its Adobe boutiques. Not Albuquerque with its airport and traffic. I'm talking about the counties where the map looks almost blank. Luna, Torrance, Socorro. The places realtors describe using phrases like unlimited potential, which usually means, there's nothing here, but in a sexy way. Here, land still sells for $500, $900 an acre, numbers that make the rest of America pause, squint at the listing, and whisper, this has to be a typo. It isn't. It's just New Mexico being New Mexico. Drive through Luna County, and you'll swear you've entered the prologue of a post-apocalyptic movie. Dust roads, silent plateaus, telephone poles marching across the desert like they're looking for a reason to retire. Every now and then, you'll see a tiny cabin or an RV parked 20 miles from the nearest complaint. Someone living a quiet life built out of solar panels, stubborn optimism, and grocery runs that require an audiobook and a prayer. Out here, you're not isolated. You're unbothered. You can build a cabin, a prefab, a shipping container house, or something you sketched on a napkin while bored in a meeting. No one's driving out from the county to ask if your foundation meets subsection 12B. They won't see it. They won't check. They won't care. But freedom comes with its fine print. Water is a negotiation. Shade is theoretical. And the desert will remind you every day who's really in charge. Still, for the right kind of person, this land feels like possibility carved into silence. A place where ideas stretch as far as the sky. Where solitude isn't punishment, it's permission. New Mexico is the gateway drug of cheap land. Once you see $600 an acre under that enormous sky, the rest of America suddenly looks overpriced. If New Mexico feels ancient, then West Texas feels infinite. A place where the land stretches so far you start to wonder if the earth forgot to stop. Out here, the sky isn't above you. It surrounds you, wraps around you, pours over the horizon like someone spilled blue paint on the map and never bothered to clean it up. Drive long enough, and the world becomes a collection of silhouettes. Distant mountains shaped like sleeping animals. Red rock ridges glowing like embers. Lonely windmills turning in the kind of breeze that carries secrets. Welcome to Hudspeth, Presidio, and Culberson counties, the stretch of West Texas where land is still $601,000 an acre, and silence isn't awkward. It's endless. This isn't the Texas of BBQ restaurants every 10 miles or towns named after someone's great uncle. This is the Texas where a neighborhood means you and a ranch gate 3 counties over. People don't move here by accident. They arrive with intent, or with a car that broke down 40 miles ago, and a questionable relationship with Google Maps. In West Texas, cheap land comes with the kind of emptiness that feels less like nothingness and more like space to think, the kind of emptiness that resets you. You'll see parcels so big the listing photos look like they were taken from a UFO. 20 acres, 40 acres, 100 acres of nobody will hear you practicing the banjo except the wind and maybe one politely curious cow. Build what you want. Cabin, barn dominium, shipping container tower of personal expression. No one's coming to check your permits, mostly because no one is coming at all. But West Texas has a personality, a dry, sarcastic one. Summers here aren't hot. They're a dare. Shade is a blessing. Clouds are celebrities. And if you want water, you'll either drill deep or get very good at hauling jugs from the nearest town. Yet there's a strange beauty to it, a raw, cinematic loneliness. Sunsets that turn the whole desert into molten gold. Nights so dark the Milky Way looks like it's leaning in to say hello. A quiet that feels almost holy. For the people who choose it, West Texas isn't the middle of nowhere. It's the beginning of something. There are places in America where the landscape doesn't shout freedom. It hums it, softly, steadily, like a tune only the trees remember. That's Arkansas. Not the billboards along I-40, not the tourist trails. I mean the real Arkansas. Sharp County, Fulton, Izard, the quiet pockets of the Ozarks where the world folds into forests so green they look permanently hydrated. Here, land still goes for $800 than $1,200 an acre, and every so often, like a blessing whispered under someone's breath, you'll find it for $900. Drive these back roads and everything feels handcrafted. Mist drifting over the hills like it overslept, creeks sliding between rocks with the patience of old storytellers, and gravel roads curving through the trees with the confidence of someone who knows exactly where it's going, even if you don't. This is the kind of place where cheap land doesn't feel like a clearance sale. It feels like a secret. You'll pass a small cabin wrapped in woods like a gift no one bothered to open, or a garden fence built from whatever lumber the owner found leaning against a barn. Chickens wander across driveways like they're running for office. Smoke from a wood stove drifts above the tree line in a way that makes you think someone inside is making coffee strong enough to resurrect your entire family tree. And the land? It doesn't demand much. It isn't picky. If you want to build a cabin, a tiny home, a workshop the size of your childhood dreams, or a barn dominium that looks like a barn trying to reinvent itself, Arkansas will simply nod and go back to minding its own business. But like all freedom, it has terms and conditions. Roads sometimes turn into roads. Humidity shows up uninvited and refuses to leave. And the forest will remind you, gently but firmly, that you are a guest here. Welcome, but not in charge. Still, if you want cheap land wrapped in trees, quiet mornings that smell like wet leaves, and nights where the loudest thing is your own thoughts, Arkansas is waiting. Not loudly, not desperately, just patiently. There are parts of Missouri where the world feels like it's been paused, not abandoned, not forgotten, just gently placed on a shelf and left to breathe. South Missouri isn't loud about its beauty. It doesn't throw mountains at you or stretch the sky into a cinematic monologue. It just exists, softly, steadily, like a place that never learned how to rush. Welcome to Shannon County, Oregon County, Texas County, the green heart of the Ozarks, where the land rolls in quiet waves, creeks cut through limestone like they're carving their autograph, and forests rise in thick, dark layers that smell like rain even when the sky is perfectly clear. Here, land still sells for $800 and $1,100 an acre, and on the right day, in the right tucked-away hollow, you might see it dip under $1,000. Rare, almost mythical, like catching a glimpse of Bigfoot, but with better resale potential. Drive through this part of Missouri, and life feels unreasonably peaceful. You'll pass gravel roads with names that sound like plot twists: Turkey Creek, Whisper Ridge, Lost Hollow. Old barns lean comfortably against time. Deer treat your headlights like philosophical questions. And somewhere in the woods, a cabin sits beside a creek, smoke curling from the chimney like the whole valley is sighing. This is a place where you can build without theatrics. A cabin, a tiny home, a workshop your relatives will call excessive until they need to borrow a tool. A barn dominium that looks like it secretly wants to become a spaceship. Missouri doesn't judge. It's too polite for that. The land is cheap for simple reasons. It's remote. The hills make roads complicated, and the forest is so thick your GPS occasionally panics and tries to reroute you back to civilization. But if you want a place where water runs clear, trees grow patient, and the world feels honest, Missouri is the quiet middle chapter in a book you didn't realize you were writing. Here, the land doesn't promise adventure. It promises calm, and sometimes that's worth more than anything. There are corners of Mississippi where the air feels thick enough to hold memories, where the trees lean in like they're listening, where the land hums a slow southern tune you don't so much hear as absorb. This isn't the postcard Mississippi people argue about online. This is the quiet strip of the state where the map turns green, then greener, then forest. Benton County, Tippah, Marion, places where the pavement gives up early and the pines take over. Here, land still sells for $700, $1,000 an acre, numbers that make the rest of the country stare at the screen like they've just discovered a glitch in capitalism. Drive these back roads and the world changes tempo. Pine needles carpet the ground in long, soft strokes. Creeks wind through the woods like they're in no hurry to get anywhere. Old porches sag in the humidity, each one holding at least 4 generations of conversations in its wood. And the clouds? They don't drift, they lounge. Mississippi cheap land isn't loud freedom. It's whisper freedom, the kind that slips into your bones before you even realize the noise is gone. You'll pass a trailer with a rusted tin roof, surrounded by a garden that looks like it was planted by someone who talks to their tomatoes. A cabin tucked behind a wall of oaks, the chimney breathing like a sleeping dog. Chickens wandering across the road with the confidence of creatures who have never paid rent. Here, you can build quietly. A cabin hidden in the trees. A tiny home lifted on wooden posts above the wet ground. A workshop that smells like sawdust and plans. No one's counting how many structures you have or asking if your deck complies with Chapter 7. But the land has terms. Humidity moves in sometime in May and refuses to leave until November. Rain forgets moderation, and every now and then, a quiet county road will decide to transform into a small river just to keep things interesting. Still, if you want land that feels alive, land that breathes, land that holds summer heat like a secret, Mississippi offers that rare blend of cheap acres and honest quiet. A place where the world moves slowly, and for once, you're allowed to move with it. There are parts of Alabama where the land feels soft around the edges, like someone took the sharp corners off reality and replaced them with rolling hills, damp soil, and a humidity that hugs you with slightly too much enthusiasm. This isn't the Alabama people picture when they think of beaches or football. This is inland Alabama, Pickens County, Choctaw, Wilcox, the quiet belt of the state where pine forests stand shoulder to shoulder, country roads stretch like warm taffy, and every gas station feels like a time capsule with better sweet tea. Here, land still sells for $800, $1,000 an acre, which is as close as you'll get to near the coast without your bank account filing a formal complaint. Drive through these counties and you start to understand why people fall in love with the South. Not the modern South, the old one. The one made of porches, sweat, and stories that last longer than the roads they're told on. Cicadas buzz like a choir warming up. Pine trees sway in slow motion, like they're thinking about something profound. And out in the distance, a farmhouse leans into the horizon like it's trying to hear the next storm arriving. Cheap land here doesn't scream for attention. It just sits quietly, offering space the way a friend offers a chair. Simple, honest, uncomplicated. You'll see a tiny cabin tucked behind a wall of trees, a garden fenced with mismatched wood that somehow works perfectly, or an RV that looks permanently parked but charmingly determined. Want to build something? Do it. A small cabin with a metal roof that sings during rainstorms, a workshop big enough to store 3 unfinished projects and one you'll finish someday. A barn-dominium only Alabama could love, half barn, half house, fully functional at confusing your relatives. But like any rural paradise, it comes with fine print. The humidity doesn't just exist, it participates. Rain falls in enthusiastic quantities, and the nearest hardware store might be 45 minutes away, depending on how kindly the GPS feels today. Still, if you want cheap land wrapped in trees, warm evenings that sound like insects gossiping, and the quiet kind of life where time moves politely, Alabama is one of the last places where that dream still fits under $1,000 an acre. There are places in Nevada where the map gives up before you do, where the roads dissolve into suggestion, where the land stretches so far it feels like the horizon is practicing social distancing. Welcome to the quiet Nevada. Not Vegas, not Reno, but the enormous empty middle of the state. Nye County, Humboldt, Esmeralda, a county so sparsely populated you could host a family reunion, a parade, and a small revolution, and still have room left over. Here, land still sells for $600–900 an acre, a price so low you start checking the listing for typos, curses, or the phrase, "Please bring your own oxygen." Drive through this part of Nevada, and the world becomes a study in extremes. Mountains rise like jagged teeth from the desert floor. Long stretches of nothing shimmer under the sun until you start seeing mirages of things you've never wanted before, like shade or a second shade. Sagebrush rolls across the sand with the determination of tumbleweeds auditioning for a western. Old mining shacks lean in the wind like they're whispering secrets to the earth. And every so often, you'll see a cabin or trailer sitting alone in a valley big enough to host 3 counties. This is freedom without supervision. You can build whatever you want out here. A tiny cabin with solar panels and stubborn character. A prefab dropped in by a truck that took a wrong turn. A shipping container compound that makes your friends wonder if you're preparing for the apocalypse or just really into metal. No one's coming to check your permits, partly because no one knows you're here, and partly because the nearest building inspector is probably 130 miles away and emotionally unavailable. But Nevada doesn't hand out cheap land for free. Water is a rare, almost mythical creature. The desert is patient and unforgiving. And sometimes the silence is so complete you can hear your own heartbeat doing an impression of a drum solo. Still, there's a strange magic to this place. A feeling that the world is large and you are small, and somehow that's comforting. Nevada is the last frontier for people who want acres of land, nights full of stars, and the kind of quiet that feels like starting over. Cheap land is never really cheap. It just hides the price somewhere else. Sometimes in the dirt, sometimes in the distance, sometimes in the silence. But there's always a reason. Across these last surviving states, the same patterns show up again and again, like an old country song drifting through a cracked truck speaker. In most of these counties, a road isn't really a road. It's 2 tire tracks and a suggestion. Sometimes it's gravel. Sometimes it's dirt. Sometimes it's optimism holding itself together after a rainstorm. Your GPS will do its best, but eventually it starts making sounds like it's reconsidering its life choices. You turn left onto something called County Road 212, and it looks more like a hiking trail someone forgot to finish. That lack of infrastructure? It keeps prices beautifully, brutally low. And then there's water. Want a well? Great. Bring money, luck, and a drill deep enough to make the earth uncomfortable. In Nevada and New Mexico, the water table is playing hide and seek. In Mississippi and Alabama, the water table is so high, you could probably grow rice by accident. Either way, you're compromising something, and cheap land loves compromise. Utilities also have opinions. Power lines vanish, cell towers disappear, internet becomes philosophical. The nearest electrical hookup might be miles away, and the nearest neighbor might be even farther. You're not paying for convenience here. You're paying for possibility, for the chance to build a life without someone in a reflective vest inspecting your every decision. And then there's the weather. Not weather. Personality. West Texas heat tries to melt your shoes. Mississippi humidity holds your face like an affectionate but overbearing aunt. Nevada deserts test your resolve. Arkansas and Missouri rain basically have hobbies. These landscapes shape you. They toughen you. They remind you that nature is in charge and you're here on polite terms. Investors don't want these places. Not yet. Developers love traffic, tourism, growth, convenience. These counties don't offer that. They offer space, silence, land that looks like it's been waiting for someone, not everyone. Cheap land isn't a trick. It isn't a trap, it's a trade. You trade convenience for quiet, comfort for independence, predictability for a kind of freedom that feels almost outdated, the good kind. Under $1,000 an acre isn't a bargain, it's an invitation, a chance to choose a different kind of life, far from crowds, far from noise, far from everything you didn't realize was exhausting you. And in the last remaining states where this still exists, the trade feels worth it. In the end, cheap land isn't really about the price. It's about the feeling you get when the world finally goes quiet. Picture it, a pond in Missouri, still as glass, holding the early morning like a secret. Mist drifting low across the water, trees standing guard along the bank, the first light of the day turning everything gold in that slow, deliberate way that makes you forgive the entire universe. Or a sunrise in New Mexico, a horizon so wide the sky feels like it's breathing. Shadows stretching across the desert, cold air turning warm 1 degree at a time, and the silence so deep you can hear your own heartbeat and believe, just for a moment, that it's the loudest sound in the world. Or the forests of Arkansas, damp leaves under your boots, fog clinging to the hills, a cabin tucked just out of sight with smoke curling from the chimney as if the trees themselves exhaled it. These are the last places where land under $1,000 an acre still exists. Not because they're less beautiful, not because they're less worthy, but because they ask something of you. They ask for patience, for effort, for presence, for a willingness to trade convenience for something quieter, simpler, truer. Cheap land doesn't promise an easy life. It promises an honest one. And if this journey made you dream a little about cabins, dirt roads, mornings with no noise but the wind, then hit like, tap subscribe, and let the algorithm know there are still people out there who care about the forgotten corners of America, places where the world slows down, where silence still has weight, where freedom hasn't been priced out yet. Thanks for watching. Stay curious, stay stubborn, stay free.